Perfect.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this Sunday for the next talk in our series for the Series PhotoIreland Festival. Today we're joined by two really interesting people. One is an artist, Ksenia Yurkova, whose work Spine, Bone, Soup and Stuffed Rabbits is currently exhibited in Rathfarnham Castle in the festival group show Bite the Hand That Feeds You. And we're also joined by curator Corina Apostol. I'm going to just briefly introduce Corina, who will lead today's session together with Ksenia, and they're going to be talking through the themes within Ksenia's monograph. Everybody should have received the monograph by email, and we'll be focusing on chapters 1, 2, and 4. Discussion and interactivity is highly encouraged. So you are welcome to use the chat room function, or you can raise your hand if you prefer to speak at any point. So I can keep an eye on that. So Dr. Corina Apostol is a curator in the Tallinn Art Hall and the curator of the Estonian Pavilion at the 59th Venice Biennale. She's a curator and member of the steering committee of Beyond Matter, an international collaborative practice-based research project that takes culture to the verge of virtual reality. Recently, she curated the second edition of the Shelter Festival, Cosmopolitics, Comradeship, and the Commons. Previously, she was the Andrew W. Mellon Fellow at Creative Time, where she co-edited Making Another World Possible, which was published by Routledge. Corina obtained her PhD at Rutgers University, where she was also the Dodge Curatorial Fellow at the Zimmerli Art Museum. She's the co-founder of the activist art and publishing collective Art Leaks, and she's also editor-in-chief of the Art Leaks Gazette. And I just want to remind everybody that the event is being recorded, and we will be sharing it afterwards on the festival website for anyone who missed it. And yeah, just to again encourage you to share your thoughts in the chat, raise your hand if you prefer to speak. And I will pass it over now to Corina.
Thank you so much, Julia, and just warm hello, and thank you for joining us this afternoon or morning or evening, depending on your time zone. I'm super happy to be here. I think the festival looks really fantastic, and I wish I could see it myself. And it's such a pleasure to work again with Ksenia Yurkova. And I just want to introduce briefly Ksenia. She's a curator, artist, and researcher right now based between Austria and also Russia. And her work spans photography, text, video, installation. She began her practice as a researcher in political theory and communication theory. And she has long focused on communication and language, which is very appropriate for today's session. And especially looking at problems of attitudes and reliance. And lately, she has also been researching the phenomenon of affect in its autonomous bodily emanation, in its personal and political registers. Ksenia has also based her approach on methods of language appropriation, over-affirmation, self-reflection, and self-criticism through ironic components inevitably added to the most pressing matters. And I met Ksenia, I think now it's over 2 years ago, because she's one of the founders of the Shelter Festival in Helsinki, which I had the pleasure of curating the second edition together with her and with Anastasia Vepreva, and which this festival is dedicated to the most pressing political issues in society. And also want to say that in addition to this festival, Ksenia has also taken part in numerous international exhibitions and festivals, and has also released several artist books. In today's session, as Julia mentioned, we are focusing on her monograph entitled Food as Structural Unit of Politics, Transmitter of Memory and Matter of Art, which accompanies the installation presented as part of the festival, Spine, Bone, Soup, and Stuffed Rabbits. In this work, which I reread recently and I find extremely fascinating and very thought-provoking, Ksenia is taking a biopolitical approach to food, looking at overconsumption and also hunger. And she takes a very personal approach, looking at specific periods of history, some of them that have touched her and her family, and also looking at contemporary ideological understandings of lifestyles, well-being, fashion. And it is very important in this publication that this notion of food, it is not only the physical and nutritional dimension of food that we are discussing here, but also its political dimension, its ideological dimension, and the way it is represented in memory, in texts, in rituals, and of course, visually. So just to begin, so I was immediately drawn from this publication in the introduction, where Ksenia confesses that a few years ago she stopped eating meat altogether, but not because of ecological or ethical aspects, but because of her own family history. And the memory of a traumatic event that started this self-analysis for her. And this event was the Siege of Leningrad, which I'm just going to briefly mention for those of you who are not familiar with this historical event. So the siege took place between 1941 and 1943. It is said to have lasted around 900 days. And it was this blockade during World War II, when basically Nazi Germany now totally restricted access to the city of Leningrad, which is now known as St. Petersburg, on the Eastern Front. And this led to one of the most deadliest events of World War II. And the population of Leningrad was, starved, and a lot of people died. And this event has, a profound effect on collective memory in Russia, although it is not so widely discussed or acknowledged. And as Ksenia mentioned, this is something that is almost like a myth now, certain traumatic aspects of it. So maybe we can begin with this from the introduction. From this very personal episode, and I'm curious if you can tell us what exactly prompted this this project. So like when you started thinking about it, why then? Why did this memory that you grew up with from your family history? Why did it become important to make it into an artwork? And yeah, what launched this project for you? And then we can go through the publication, I guess.
Thank you, Corina, very much for this massive introduction. It's super uncanny for myself all the time to listen about myself and regale its words. Yeah, you started to speak about the siege, and I consider it as a departure point of my artistic endeavors. Because it's usually how I work. I need to find a connection, from effective connection, whether with my biography or biography of my family or origin, something which is not only a domain of the conscience, but also which can affect in a different way. And my focus is to dissect this entity which bothers me. So in consideration with food, for me, it was very obvious and very clear where to start. And of course, it's my own mythology. We're all creating our own mythology. And I do not want even to put it in like a cornerstone that I do not eat meat. But the question why I do not eat meat is more, important, because I understand that I can't answer this question. And my research, my book is an attempt to answer this question. And that's why I peel off the layers and coming to the core idea, to the core philosophy, what can be food and how it can be charged culturally, politically, artistically, whatsoever. And I'm peeling off the layers one by one, trying to put some hypotheses. I'm not answering any questions. I'm putting questions. So probably we can move to the text itself, and we'll try to grasp a few quotations or a few thoughts, and it will be way easier for me to explain what I'm in.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted, you know, before we go to the text, if also if from the public, like at any point you can, you know, raise your hand, or if you want to say something, or you have some kind of connection to these events or concepts, like please, yeah, please raise your hand or drop something in the chat, and we can read it out loud, because it's meant to be also with your participation. So it's very important for us to get this this feedback and reaction from you.
Yeah, and probably it's also important to mention that it's not the goal also to discuss the historical event, even if it's important to start with, and to observe it as a model, as a certain template for thinking. But I would propose to focus on the idea that to the idea of elementary freedom. Is your food choice, is it your liberal choice, or are you affected with something? And can be a field of ideologies, and how does it work? So how this machinery of ideology can work with the connection with food. So probably, that's another question. I'm not sure that everyone from the audience has seen my work. So maybe the easiest way will be also to put some links to the chat. So they can be copy pasted. And if we come to this, if we go to this direction that we start to discuss my work, I can also show some excerpts from it from the website. So I'm trying to organize something. Yeah.
Okay. So are there any now reactions from the audience? Any like first thoughts, or we should continue with the experts that we selected? Okay.
Not yet.
I don't see any raised hands. Okay. Okay, maybe we need to go deeper into it. Okay. So I think we also structured this discussion around some key terms, and one of them is definitely trauma. And this is something that I've also like long you know, studied, and it's a key term for this work. And in the publication, Ksenia has this like going through different types of trauma, whether it's generational or genetic. There's also mention of traumatic repetition, traumatic recollection. And from the first chapter, one of the you know, quotes that really struck me was from the beginning. I'm going to read now just a little bit. An entangled problem of collective trauma characterizes contemporary Russian society, together with memories of official history and the impossibility to vocalize and overcome the shocking past, end quote. And yeah, I think it's one of the key elements of trauma, that it doesn't stay only in the past, but it affects generations, whether consciously or unconsciously, whether we realize it. And that, you know, even today, this landmark event that kind of was the impetus for Ksenia's project is something that still reverberates and still so much influences people. I don't know if you want to say something, Ksenia, about this.
Yes, actually what forced me, or what moved me to again ponder about the matter of food, it was, I think, in 2014 when the so-called counter sanctions were imposed on Russia. Well, it's important to speak a little bit about it because after the annexation of Crimea, there were sanctions, outer sanctions imposed, but counter sanctions. There were some actions, political actions, which were done by government of Russia. And that would mean that the import of products of food was stopped, was banned. And of course, the whole country was first shocked by this footage of tons and tons of food destroyed by bulldozers. There are a lot of videos, and immediately it raised this memory of starving city during the years of the siege. And people started to raise this question, how we came up to this state that we're destroying food, having this such a wound, historical wound in our own past. Mm-hmm. Because still the connection with food within some people is very strong, is very deliberate, is very accurate. In my family, which spent time, which used to live in Leningrad, so I can call them first-hand witness, nothing could be thrown. Like it was impossible to throw food. It was impossible to throw away bread. Everything was eaten with bread, like watermelons were eaten with bread. So of course it drove my attention. I started to ask questions, and first stories about this event, about the siege, I've gotten from my grandparents. I write in my monograph that Russian society, according to Alexander Etkind, and of course everything is discussable here, but according to him, that Russian society didn't achieve the state of post-memory. So it is still, we're still in the state of traumatic condition, which doesn't give us any possibility to utter out something, to utter this traumatic condition. So the figure of omission is a core thing which I'm like revolving around when you need to say something, but you have no access, because trauma is something inaccessible. And trauma is something which is conveyed to future generations. So I write about the Holocaust and how Mariana Hirsch is writing only the second generation was the first who started to utter it out, found the way to speak about it. Because if you're in traumatic condition, there is no connection with language. And I started to notice that I can actually compare language or text with food, and correlation and connection, and how we're dealing with the subject of food is somehow reminding me. And I started to collect some testimonies or some thoughts from very, very different writers and authors. And for instance, for me, very important was Irina Sandomierska. She's a professor, I think, in Linköping University in Sweden. She was speaking about alimentary dystrophy elementary dystrophy, it was a diagnosis during the siege of Leningrad. So it's a very acute condition when your body starts to consume itself. And in this condition, the only thinking can rotate around questions of food. There are a lot of testimonies, and more, I'm very happy that there are more and more now. Again, just to jump a little bit aside, the opposition towards the official history is a history of micro-narratives, which is a collection of testimonies, diaries, texts from individuals. And I found this very important project, online project. I think it's run by the European University in St. Petersburg. It's called Прожито in Russian, so like lived, something which is lived, a collection of diaries. And many diaries in this huge archive were the siege diaries. Mm-hmm. I took a lot of material from the siege diaries to my work as well. I was interested how people wrote about food, in which language they used to speak about something which is not available and which is highly desirable. So Irina Sandomierskaya speaks about this dystrophic text about the practice of writing under totalitarian control. What can it be? How empty this text can be, how it can remain, how it can remain text but have no nutritional value in itself. So this comparison was striking for me, and I started to search more and more metaphors in this comparison of ingestion and writing. And I found a lot in Walter Benjamin, in writers of Russian formalism. And yeah, but it's another thing. You mentioned about mythology of Leningrad Siege. Mm-hmm. You know, it's very painful matter to touch, because still I noticed that, I can say that officially it's even more or less forbidden to speak about it. This is something sacred which you can't touch at all. You can't dissect it, you can't research it. There are several prominent researchers, but they're in the media, in the Russian official media, they described as highly controversial. I mean, Nikita Lomagin and some rest of them, but just this bluntly speak about the siege is not possible so far, because it evokes the very aggressive reaction in it. Mm-hmm. And there is only one way how we can speak about the siege, only to glorify the fortitude of people who withstood or who lived through, who survived. But there is nothing about the flip side of this event, which of course is ugly, and which of course raises some questions, not about Nazi atrocities, but about the atrocities of Russian government, who also did certain things, exploiting own society, keeping the level of production of military compounds on the same level with other not besieged cities. So I came up with this figure of of an animal, but let's discuss it a little bit further because I see that you mentioning some other quotes, so we can come to this part.
Yeah, and I was also struck, by this observation that you make in the text that, it's different from to be sieged within your own city. It's like, you become like, which becomes kind of like a ghetto, like your own home, and it's not like you're sent somewhere like in a camp, but you're still, living in your home, but then you're put under these like, unthinkable conditions for survival, which I think it's also like very important to remember. And I'm also wondering, now that you're talking about this impossibility of testifying, of like witnessing, has it always been like this in Russian like history, or has there been periods when it was more acceptable, like you could open up this subject, or has it always been kind of taboo to discuss the realities of what people had to do to survive? And this what you mentioned.
I'm not a historian. I'm not a historian, and my touch on history is very amateurish. I can accept it, and I'm not ashamed of this because it's not my goal. My goal is artistic work. But what I know that some of the documents started to be declassified only in early 2000s. And that was the time when historians started to dig out more and more. And some foreign historians, for instance, Alexis Perry, whose text, the War Within, I find very interesting. And she, even more interesting, she's focusing on feministic aspect of this catastrophe. I will explain later why. And so she started to work in these archives, but within several years, they started to be classified again. And what I've heard recently, not only about the cables of the siege, but about the major documents of the Second World War, which in Russia is called Great Patriotic War, that the president closed them until 2035 or 40.
Oh, wow.
So we can imagine how many documents there still are there. And again, according to Alexander Etkind, if we do not speak, if we don't speak it out, and if we don't speak it through, we do not go through the process of grief and mourning. So the whole society is pushed to be in this condition of traumatic repetition. You're like in this whirlpool. You can't help but repeating this thing more and more and more. And this is a very tragic story for me about Russian society, that there is no access to own past and own memory. There is abruption, there is silence, there are figures of omission. And unfortunately, we are doomed to repeat these things more and more. And he speaks, he says, he writes that we still live on the same place where the catastrophes happened. We still among these people, or these descendants of these people who committed the atrocities. And it's sort of, it's very schizophrenic condition, because within state, we're in the state of indistinction of what has happened or what is happening. And yeah. And indistinction, the word indistinction is also very important for me, and I use it in my artistic work quite a lot later on. And I'm imposing this indistinction to my cookbook, where I create this inedible recipes. So it's an indistinction of what you can eat and what you can't eat. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned in the book that actually people did eat like bread and sawdust as like a daily ration. So it was this kind of, you know, food that today, like, you know, it's kind of almost like unthinkable. And also like related to the issue of documents, I was also struck by these, you know, staged photographs that are mentioned in the monograph that I think there's some images like at the end of the book. I don't know if you can you share them of these
Sure.
these official images where people are shown growing vegetables and being very happy and you know, creating this kind of false narrative, you know, on top of the atrocities that were happening. I find these extremely striking. And you know, creating this false image of you know, almost abundance and you know, bountifulness and yeah. And you
yes,
even these images were kind of hard to get, like they're like you didn't get permission to get basically. Yeah.
That's true. I couldn't get, so yeah, I've stolen this image because I contacted RIA Novosti for these purposes, to publish it and to use it also in my exhibition, and I didn't get any permission. But of course, they're successors of state-owned media corporations. It's a very famous depiction of the besieged city in 1942 by Boris Kudayarov. He was one of the 5 appointed photographers who was allowed to make pictures in the city. Why it's very important, because it connects with this idea of a witness. Who is the witness in the camp, in the Nazi camp, and it's researched quite profoundly. There is a notion that we don't have any witness there, or the witness is a person who was exterminated in the camp. Being in traumatic condition, being inside, you can't have the proper distance to analyze the situation. It's from one hand, it's more from metaphysical hand. Another thing that Nazis really have exterminated all the documents and everything before the Allies troops entered the camps. So first, what Soviet soldiers or American soldiers saw there, they couldn't even understand what has happened there. So only after, because it was more or less cleaned. And following this train of thoughts, I'm putting this very controversial hypothesis, who can be a witness of the besieged city. And I come to this figure of a cannibal. And for me, figure of a cannibal, it's not a figure of perpetrator. It's a person who is forced to obtain this condition. And usually about these people, they say that it's in animal condition. And it's already, again, for me, like a trigger to start to speak about animal. And I mentioned Alexis Perry, who wrote that actually what she found in the cables, that most of these people who were accused in cannibalism were young mothers who were foreigners in the city. So they didn't have any social connections. And that's why they were like forced to cross this boundary, not for themselves, but to feed their children. So yeah, sadly to say, for me, this was a figure of a witness of this catastrophe. And of course, I realized that it's something which won't be discussed. I don't know, maybe never, or yeah. And then like thinking about it, okay, I inevitably come to this Levi-Strauss question, who we are. Maybe we are all cannibals. Yeah.
And also in this first chapter, you talk about this image of the zoo, because also like one of these stories was that all these 900 days of the blockade, all the animals in the zoo were spared, none of them was eaten, and this was something to be proud of. And this, of course, it's kind of like this huge, like it's like an absurd situation that we know that people were starving to death and committing these acts of cannibalism, but on the other hand, they were proudly not eating the animals in the zoo. And this is also part of your work later. You like one of the video like directly engages with this zoo metaphor, and talking about bear life and the zoo as this place of exception within a place of exception, which was the besieged city. Do you want to show any images related to this, or later when we get to the final chapter?
Yeah, maybe later I can say a few words about this zoo historiography. And it's a very unclear situation for me. And I honestly, when I started my research, I contacted the official historian of the museum, which is situated in the zoo. And very soon I realized that there is also some threshold which people who are working there can't pass, because they're really cherishing this story, repeating it, that none of the animals were eaten, which for me is astounding, because of course it's very hard to imagine. Or even if you want to really preserve this place, because it's known that theaters were working, some cultural places were working just to show that the city is alive, and orchestras were performing music, almost dying of fatigue and hunger. Probably the same story was about the zoo, but no, it is said that it was only on the free will of the zoo janitors to keep it alive. I tried to find some documents where the zoo was protected by soldiers, by military, because you saw from this picture with this cabbage harvest that there is a tower with a soldier, and probably the zoo also would have been protected. I couldn't find. I accessed some archives in St. Petersburg. I found very weird information saying that actually the number of employees in zoo was higher than it's officially announced. I again went to the historian back, addressed her, and then I received very aggressive open letter from the official historian and official biologist of the zoo that there is an artist, Ksenia Yurkova, who is living in Finland, and she is using like Finnish grants to debunk the history, or to falsificate the history of the Leningrad Siege. So yeah, I'm not a good person. It was figured out, and so I couldn't get any adequate feedback from these people, because I see that for them speaking about this matter is also highly traumatizing. And I can only ponder about it. For me, it's mythology. For me, it's mythology and how it's told to you in comparison. For instance, yeah, but during the siege of Paris, the animals from the zoo were eaten in the first day, served in the best restaurants, you know. So it's like, well, the matter of our pride that we didn't do it. But of course, it sounds totally inhuman to be proud of the animals kept in the zoo, whereas you know that people eat people because of starvation. And for me, the images I got from the story about around zoo, I started to use it in my video work, and later pondered about it and and even the one of the aspects, one of the stories, I read it in my book. I put in the title of my work, so the stuffed rabbit is one of the imagery I got from this mythology about the zoo. Of course, they were eaten. What I knew from the very beginning, that in the first days of the siege in September, when the city started to be bombed, the military just came to the zoo and they killed all the predators, because the bombs could just fall into the cage and the predators could just run out and start to assault people. So it's already like falsified a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, there's a comment, Julia. Did you write this comment?
Yeah,
is it from your? It's from you. Yeah, no, go ahead, because we are at the end of the first chapter. So I was going to suggest to take a pause and then get questions or reactions from the public. So
sure.
This is
no, it just reminded me of the siege, the botanists who were protecting the seed bank, and they all died of starvation, but none of them ate any of the seeds. And of course, it's a very different.
It's a very different story. It's it's Vavilov and his collection, unique collection of seeds. I didn't touch this story because this is something else. Because this was a group of scientists, you know, not just laboratory workers or janitors or whomever. I could even believe this story. The terrible part of the story is not that there is such a harsh detail about that people like starved to death, but they saved it. It was really saved, but it disappeared a few years ago, and no one knows where is it now. We assume that it was bought by Monsanto or someone like this. Yeah. I heard just some rumors about it, but people really started to ask, but where is it now? Because it was there for a long time, laboratory research, no information now. I keep asking. I do not know. I do not have like straight connections to the scientists, but what I've heard, there is very strange story happening at the moment. So probably capitalism already reached this research as well. Yeah, and about the figure of cannibal. So it was not the first time how this nomination was used to dehumanize someone. And in the very end of my book, I'm referring to one of the documented 10, I think, which was fully dedicated to Manifesto Antropophago of Oscar de Andrada. actually, yeah. Yeah, and it was called Nuclea Historica and subtitled Anthropophagy and Histories of Cannibalism. Where is the clear distinction what is anthropophagy, very deliberate, very important spiritual ritual of understanding the subjectivity, of admitting the subjectivity of your enemy, ancestor, enemy. There is a very complicated machinery. The philosopher Eduardo Vieira de Castro writes about this Amerindian perspectivism, because it's all about subject and object, subjectivity and objectivity. It's not about killing, eating, perpetrating. It has very important spiritual meaning. But of course, colonizers who went to Latin America at that time and who witnessed these rituals, they immediately called these people cannibals, and it was a ground to colonize them, to defeat them, and to impose their moral superposition over them. So that's why this figure of cannibal was important for me as well, regarding like my own history and regarding actually the general principle of thinking.
So now we're at the end of the first chapter. I'm just curious from the audience, like how you, if you've dealt with these topics in your work or like readings, not necessarily related to the historical example that we're discussing, but other examples in your context, or yeah, I'm assuming people came here because they're interested in this topic of food and politics and that Ksenia's work deals with. So just curious if anybody wants to drop something in the chat or raise their hand. We can make a pause for a few minutes while you gather your thoughts.
Maybe I can just talk again. No, I think what you said is really good about, like, if everybody kind of thinks about their own context as well. Of course, in Ireland, here we had the Great Famine, and only recently the topic of cannibalism was breached. There was a documentary that came out. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's only recent. It just came out on RT there. And I think it was the first time they mentioned cannibalism to the public as something that actually potentially happened during the Great Famine. I don't think it was mentioned before, at least not outside of academic circles. But yeah, I think it'd be great if if people in the audience as well thought about where they're from or where they're based, and kind of similar stories, similar historical context.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll start. I'm Lily. I live in Singapore, which is why I'm so improperly dressed right now, because it's so hot. Anyway, thank you for doing this. I've been wondering about food. So I run a recipe platform and to talk about issues in Singapore, so political and social issues. And one of the things in my methodology about sharing photographs is actually over dinner. And so I cook the dinner that ties in with the theme, whatever the theme is, whether it's heritage or euthanasia or LGBT or caregiving, just all social and political issues. And I've become so interested in cooking the food. So my question about not so much memory, but rage. So I wanted to ask Ksenia, and you can talk about this as we go along, whether or not you have asked your viewers, your audience, and printing work through the recipes. I haven't seen all your writings, and I will do that. But I just wonder if now, while looking at your work, would invoke some emotions, what are those emotions? And I'm wondering if for my own projects, whether or not food that I prepare, who looked at the photographs and feel something, whether it's rage or this desire to do something, because you know that we're so good at talking about food and memory, and it's always very sweet. You know, it's about grandmother, it's about the kitchen, it's about smells and all that stuff, right? Which we all know, and that's all great. So that's why I'm very interested in your work, because you've kind of made it, you've kind of exposed issues, political issues that are going on. So I'm okay with that, and I think that's great. But the possibility of taking it and the audience feeds back to you about the issues.
Yeah, I think
my connection is not the great.
Unfortunately, I had so unstable connection, so I think I was lacking like the most important parts of your question. So
Okay.
if you can just, unfortunately, if you can just like help me, if someone heard, to recap it like briefly in the chat that I can read it.
Okay, I'll just,
thank you very much.
But maybe I'm also curious if you've shown this work in Russia ever, or like or have you had reactions from Russian audiences, and how did they maybe differ from the reactions that when you showed it in Helsinki, or I think you showed it in Greece also? Yeah.
Actually, it's very interesting because this work was widely shown, and I showed it twice in Finland, one time in Austria, in Greece, and very briefly in St. Petersburg, but I didn't have my personal exhibition there. It was just a group exhibition of some award nominees, and it was not really shown properly. And of course, it's not the way how I wanted my work to be shown in Russia. But from one hand, there is no interest in such a work, or maybe people do not dare to take it. So it's totally blank. So I do not have any response from Russian people on my work at all. This is crazy to say. I have responses from, also to mention again about the siege of Leningrad. There was not only German troops, German, Austrian, right? Austria was part of Germany at that time, but also from another side, there was Finland, and there were some Italian, Spanish troops who actually made this circle around the city. That's why I'm using this so many languages in my one of my works in this vegetarian interviews, where people are speculating how easily they can, easily or not easily, they can cross the boundaries, this taboo on consuming of flesh. And I had the response in Finland, and I had the response in Austria. So I sort of dared to like show this work and again to bother these wounds in the countries which were on the different sides of the conflict that time. But I never had a chance to speak about it in Russia. And yeah, unfortunately, these days, most of my work is sort of, I don't know, it can be very problematic to speak about it in Russia, because in my recent work, I'm taking the conflict in Beslan, the hostages in the school of Beslan, also this. So I'm kind of tickling, you know, something which is considered to be forbidden. It's my very healthy aggression towards what is happening now. That's why probably I'm dealing with these questions. But yeah, I think I answered your question. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm just reading the question from Lily. Mm-hmm. Sorry, my question was about whether the food recipes you mentioned invoke rage amongst the audience. Yeah, in the third chapter of my monograph, I making this introspection of the works dedicated to matter of food, and of course, I think this strong affects as rage were possible during Dada time, who made these first experiments with food, with also this matter of indistinction, eatable, uneatable, also a figure of cannibal and glue made of human bones was mentioned there. So that time, the slap in the face of public taste was actually more relevant. Now you can't really surprise anyone, I think, with this recipes. So, and they were not done as a matter of provocation. As I write, for me, it was my personal distance from political aspect to poetical aspect, not to be that dramatic, not to drown into the horror of memories of the past, but also to liberate myself into poetical field. And for the cookbook, I used many sources. I discovered and I researched the recipes of survival. So I started to read which food or non-food people consumed during different hunger events, hunger situations, not only in Russia, but in other countries as well. So it's not historical, but yeah, it's poetical. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a very interesting question about the strong affects, rage. I'm mentioning this matter of glue and gelatin, and this indistinction, this, you know, some jelly is quite important for me in many aspects. I also researched the core word rendering. What is this shell? What is this 3D rendering? What is rendering as a matter of processed animal bones? What was the role of gelatin in symbolical capital of some propagandistic movies? And I come also to a concept of Marina Gringic about gelatinization and capitalism. I wanted to show you as a matter of fun. Wait a second. It's always like you have a lot of notes and you start to speak and losing all your notes. I can read this quote from Marina Gringic. She used the term by Lopez Petit, gelatinization, as a repetitive performative mechanism, equating global capitalism as the only possible social reality. Gelatinization means reality is covered with obviousness. The form is not hiding the content anymore, but the way in which it is presented through its formalization makes the content obsolete. And just yesterday, strolling through the streets of Vienna, I found something very spectacular, and I wanted to show you. At least to make this leap from a historical context to a contemporary context.
Mm-hmm.
I will share the screen. As I mentioned, I live in Austria, and Swarovski is a big thing, which of course has always started as military production. And the side project is this luxury, glamorous, whatever decoration. But I really enjoyed this.
Are they going to eat the Swarovski things? Oh.
Okay, I think that's enough.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can drop the link.
Literally this
it's
jelly. Like... Yes, of course.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Yeah. 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 So maybe now we turn to chapter 2, and then you know, this more contemporary discussions. And I mean, I think you mentioned Agamben and you know, his notion of biopolitical space and bare life, and you know, comparing it to being in this political status and being like reduced to bare life in the camp. And you know, and then we also go to this concept of necropolitics, so like death, basically death politics in connection to bare life, that Achille Membe introduces. And then you mentioned Marina Grizinic. So I think there was a question also in the chat about more reading on this. So if you go through actually all of Ksenia's monograph, you'll find like so many references to different publications on these topics, and a lot of them are available online. So yeah, I really recommend going through the book and looking at the references that she's giving. And then I think the last quote that we had selected from this chapter was yeah, about from Matthew Chulu. Am I saying his name correctly?
Chulu.
Chulu, yeah. That many of scholars consider non-human animals primarily as bare lives and vulnerable bodies. And in their analysis of how animals are subjected to discipline and biopower, they tend to bypass the question of animal subjectivity. And Chulu points to the fact that today animals are understood and governed not only as passive and as victims, as bare life, but also as subjects of worlds, which doesn't undermine their biopolitical management, but intensifies it and optimizes it. Mm-hmm. So now maybe we come to this again, to this zoo metaphor and your own video, where I think it's the third video in your work, which is direct reference to this zoo story from Leningrad, but also to this kind of notion of biopower in relation to animal subjectivity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably before we turn to my video, I wanted to add something to this concept of place of exception and, of course, very renowned concept of Georgia Agamben, and to move a little bit further, because Agamben was still pondering about the actual place of camp, which has its own geographical position, these borders. It could be found, even if it's a place of exception, it is there. But now, and I heard this idea from, again, a Hill member who is wondering about necropolitics. It says that these borders, this camp condition is not a fixed place anymore. That, for instance, refugees carry these borders with themselves. It could be an alien passport. It could be certain conditions, certain displacement conditions. So they're already accepted to the country, but they're put somewhere, or they're not allowed to go somewhere, or they're not allowed to meet somewhere. So all these boundaries are already incorporated in the bodies of people. So it's a new level. It's how to build this more humane zoo, taking into account the subjectivity. The new level of biopolitics already sort of like liberates your movement, but you start to carry your own border with you. And I will also send this link on Ahil's members lecture, which probably could also add something to this. And why actually I remember it, because when we were discussing with Julia how we show my work and what is it all about, Julia mentioned also a refugee camp in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And recently there was a scandal about this poor ration of people which were kept in this refugee camp. So it was literally nothing. So their daily ration of food was so ridiculous that you couldn't even believe that it happens in Ireland these days.
Yeah.
Am I right, Julia?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so it's called actually direct provision, and it's basically it's Ireland's system for asylum seekers, and people are basically accommodated in communal centers or like ex-hotels, those types of places. And the centers they're actually managed on a for-profit basis by private contractors. And it was established in the year 2000, and it was intended to provide basic needs for those who are awaiting decisions on their documentation, their applications. And it was designed as a short-term measure, but it's, I think like the average amount of time people stay there is 3 years, but some residents have spent up to 12 years in the system. And there's a lot wrong with it, but because we're talking about food, I'll just focus on the food. Basically, food in direct provision is provided at set times, and there is limited cooking facilities. It varies from center to center. There are some self-catering centers, and they're like the better ones. And it's only in a small number of centers that self-catering is permitted, and they have facilities. So the food that is provided is it's notoriously lacking in variety and nutrition as well. And we're actually working with 2 residents from 2 different centers for the festival publication that's going to be out in autumn. And one of them told me how in like one center for 30 days in a row, they would get dinner of chicken nuggets and chips. Now, this isn't like this isn't a unique story. This is like, for example, on Twitter, you might come across some people sharing their food. Like there was one I remember that was somebody's Christmas dinner, and it was like worse than airplane food, worse than what you get on an airplane. And some centers do have communal kitchens, and those are kind of like the better centers, but a lot of centers don't. I'm not sure exactly of the statistic here. So those people that don't have facilities to cook, They are they're not allowed to cook at all, not even in their rooms, although some of them do cook in their rooms, which kind of becomes like an act of protest, I suppose, as well. And I suppose what does this mean? I think it means, you know, the deterioration of your physical, your mental health, your self-esteem. Yeah, you have no way to develop your skills, or work or experience. There's no way for you to integrate into society. I mean, it's a very blatant violation of human rights. Yeah, and you know, like there's a lot of groups and individuals that advocate very strongly against the direct provision system, of course. And some of these groups and individuals, they gather together and they cook together with the residents, because they may not have other opportunities to cook. And you know, a lot of them, for example, are cooking for their families, and these are children who were born in the system. So it's maybe the first time they ever taste their, never mind their national food, but their mother's cooking, you know. So yeah, I think thank you for bringing it up, because it is, I think it's really, it's quite a stain, I suppose, on Ireland, and this control through human bodies. And I actually I just wanted to, while you were talking, I opened 1 second. There was a report that was published by NASC, which is the Irish Immigrant Support Centre, and it's called "What's Food Got to Do with It?" Mm-hmm. And I just pulled out a little quote from there, because we were talking about control of bodies, of course. This quote says, basically, the report, I can't see who wrote it now, I'm sorry, but they interviewed different people, different residents. A recurrent theme during the interviews was participants expressing fear of retribution if they were found out to have complained about food or any other aspect of life in their direct provision centers. People spoke about the fear that they may be moved or that they would be seen as troublemakers by the management, with fear of negative implication for their asylum claim. And no, this is just about food, because there's, of course, other issues. Like they have, a lot of people don't have access to work or education. I think their right to work is only very recent, maybe 2-3 years. The facilities are often overcrowded. There is no privacy. You're talking about no autonomy. Yeah, and that's kind of.
But this ban on cooking is actually mind-boggling, because it's sort of here, but you can't access it. This is like this symbolical displacement.
It's it's horrible. And I think they have another, I don't want to be throwing numbers and statistics around, but more recently they're saying that I think residents in direct provision are 5 times more likely to develop mental health issues. Of course, I mean, you're talking about, you know, you don't know what even the long-term implications of this is, because it's still ongoing and it's recent, you know, and there's children that are born and raised in the system. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They are talking now about ending it. They have some year as a goal, but it's been going since 2000, and it was meant to be a short term at the time. And it's 21 years now. So.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a bit of a big rant.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes, but this idea of displacement and the person who is displaced and deprived of human rights, this animal, according to Agamben, but animal has many different meanings, and the figure of animal, the notion of animal, it's also nomination to dehumanize someone. Like if I call someone an animal, this means something. I was fascinated by these discussions, like also to jump to the contemporary situation and elementary othering, how this pandemic started, because this machinery of accusation and othering. So it was called Chinese virus in the first place, and people started to ponder about Chinese ration, like it has started because they eat pangolins, it has started because they eat bats, There were this sort of shocking discoveries of Chinese people eating these animals. So it's this machinery of othering and blaming according the elementary choices, right? So we all were witnessing how it happened. And I found something absolutely brilliant, and I write about it also in the end of my book, where I take the concept of Deleuze and concept of Oedipal animal, tamed, innocent, harmless animal, in the opposition to this werewolf, to this alienated, to this animal who is chased away because this animal is a perpetrator. Wait a second, I will. Sorry, I have a soft spot on this conspiracy porn, but I can't help showing it. Oh, wait. I need 1 more minute to find it. Okay, I will do the following. I will share the teaser of my all 3 videos with you. Do you see it now?
Yeah.
Do you see the video now? Because I'm a bit lost.
Yeah, but I think it's paused now.
Yes.
Yeah, but we see it.
Sorry. My connection. Yeah, unfortunately, it's very hard to show now because connection is very poor.
Yeah, Ksenia, maybe you can put the, if there is a link in the chat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Technics is against me today. So probably briefly to speak about these three videos, as only one is shown in the PhotoIreland festival now. It's this colored one where I make the interviews with people who consider themselves vegetarians. So I simply ask them to eat their vegetarian food and answer my questions, but to eat with their hands, which is for Western person is considered to be like not very cultural. I would say more natural. And I assume that this discomfort could make some interesting in-between affected reactions, because you're fluxing between this natural and cultural condition, like speaking and eating, and this process are opposite to each other. So this is my video, and I'm starting with the very innocent questions like what were the premises for you to become vegetarian? What's your story? And then we came to speculation like, what if you find yourself in a case that you need to survive? Or what if there is ethically grown animal meat on market? Or what if if it's ethically grown human meat on market? Like, I think most of them were very curious to try what is human ethically grown meat on market. So actually it was about how we, through some ideology, through some comprehension of certain terms, how we build our own identities, and how far it can be from our real intentions. The second one, actually, I'm replaying this photograph, which I showed previously. So I was making this planting sessions, planting and harvesting sessions in the beds of the different cities. And funny enough, visually, of course, it reminded me this guerrilla gardening practice, which these days is quite popular self-organized movements, also against industrial food and this ethical ideas of growing your own dinner and not supporting industrial consumption and whatsoever. And the third one was when I'm disguised in the costume of the rabbit. So this is my rabbit. This is my rabbit stuffed with something also incomprehensible. I refer to, again, historical anecdote, again, about this besieged city. I found out I couldn't just leave it aside. There was the story how they forced predators to eat vegetarian. So there were predators in the zoo, but there was no meat. And but out of a sudden, they found out that they have a lot of rabbit skins, just empty rabbit skins, full storage. And so they started to make puppets. They started to stuff grass and sawdust in the rabbit skin, dripped few drops of blood, and gave it to predators. And they started to act on this visual stimuli. And they started, so they considered that it's a rabbit because out of its shape, and they started to eat vegetarian. This I found astounding. So this actually influenced my comprehension and concept of the stuffed rabbit, like how easy it is to force to eat vegetarian, or how easy it is to force using visual stimuli to put you in certain condition, certain predisposition. So my third video is this dumpster diving rabbit. Actually, this video caused some rage, not my recipe books, but this video, because people asked me, how can you be ironic if you're speaking of such horrific matters? And yeah, I found this way to escape this over dramatization, because it's really something terrible to speak about, and also for myself to overcome this horror which I was dealing with. And believe me, to read this Hunger Diaries for 2 months in a row every day, it could make some impact on me. So I figured out this rabbit, this character, who started to make this dumpster diving. And yeah, dumpster diving is also a sort of contemporary ideology where people do not buy food anymore, so they fetch their food from the dumpster dumps, and it's called also freeganism. So I just appropriated this visuals, this visual side, and incorporated it in my work. Mm-hmm. So that's it briefly.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we're almost out of time, so I don't know if there's any kind of lingering questions or comments from the audience.
I have probably a very boring question, and it's not so much related to the monograph, but more to the like a lot of the images in the project, spine bone soup and stuffed rabbits. A lot of the imagery is you're taking this kind of commercial approach, and I'm just wondering if you could just very briefly kind of speak about that. Kind of why did you take this approach?
I mentioned it in the text that I'm using also as a source of inspiration this famous monument of Soviet culture, this book for healthy and tasty food, which actually, I don't know, almost every Soviet family used to have. And I remember it from my childhood, how I was simultaneously attracted and disgusted by the imagery I found in this book. And of course, many recipes which were described there, they were not accessible for common people, for a common citizen, because simply you couldn't find any components to make this lavish dishes. There is like caviar and Soviet champagne. Very funny. And the auratic concept, according to Walter Benjamin, auratic, so it's something which is near but also distant simultaneously, pushed me to think about the contemporary imagery of food in glossy magazines. Sometimes it really, it's not even metaphorically inedible, but I'm a little bit involved also in photographic production. I know that the best depiction of food is not when you're depicting real food. You need plastic or whatever substitution. And in Asian countries, for instance, there is a big industry working on this market. And you can't even imagine the materials they use to build this something which has to raise your appetite. So it's entirely inedible. So these two components influenced me in my decision to work with this certain imagery in my cookbook. So it's a combination of contemporary visual language in advertisement and also this past, which is inevitably influencing my comprehension of this imagery. So it's sort of like monsters, sort of like this Frankenstein, which can work in both directions.
Ksenia, can you put your cookbook name and link?
Of course, it is online. I can simply...
It's in your website, is it?
It's on my website and it's on my Vimeo. I think you can really easily find like Ksenia Yurkova Vimeo and this book will be there. I don't know if we have enough time that I find it and put it in the chat, but it's really very easy to find it.
And what's the name of the cookbook, please?
It's the same name. It's Spine Bone Soup and Stuffed Rabbit. Just a second.
This was really great. I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a lot.
I just realized that it's very charged, that it's a lot. I piled a lot and it's not enough time to speak about every aspect. And it's a bit hectic, so sorry for this.
And where are you showing next? What are you doing next?
Good question.
What I'm showing next, or once more, can you repeat it? I didn't hear it well.
Where are you? Corina, you want to repeat for me?
I don't know. She's asking like, what is your next project and where are you showing it, basically?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm finishing my also kind of large scale project, which has two parts. There is something already on my website. It's called Degrees Volume 1 and Volume 2. It's about personal and political aspects of affect. So I'm now pondering about, I started in this project about food. I started to speak about affect, but it also only was a small part of the whole thing. But now I'm more and more focusing on the affect theory and different approaches to the affect theory, and mainly neurobiological aspect, which actually attracts me the most. And the body of work is almost done, so I'm editing videos now, and I hope to show it in Austria next year, but yeah, you never know, maybe earlier. So, but it's on the very top of my website, so you can go through.
Yeah, I dropped some links there to your Vimeo, to the website.
Oh yeah, thank you.
You were talking, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Do we have other comments or reactions from people still with us in the chat?
Okay.
Okay.
Perhaps if we're wrapping up, and just before we go, if I could just bring everyone's attention then to next week's events that you can book as well. I'll pop some links in the chat as well. We have an upcoming artist talk with Shimon Lowe, interviewed by Maria Delaney, and the final episode of Critical Recipes will be live next Saturday with artist Ana Nunez Rodriguez, who looks also at our social histories through the potato. And on the 29th, we're launching the second issue of Over Journal, so you can book all those through the links I put in the chat. I also just wanted to say thank you to everybody who attended. A huge thank you to Corina and Ksenia. I think it was super interesting. I took loads of notes. And I'm really looking forward to actually going back to the exhibition as well, and just looking at it again with everything you spoke about in mind. And I also want to say thank you to the festival supporters. This year has been kindly supported by the Arts Council of Ireland, Dublin City Council, and the Office of Public Works. And I'm just spotting that Vera, I think we missed a question from Vera earlier on. So I'm just trying to scroll up there and have a look at. Oh, she said, I really find interesting listening to Discourse of Cannibalism. Is there any text or book that you would recommend to read on such a topic? And I think, Corina, you did make a point as well. There are a lot of references in the monograph that would be good to revisit.
I mean, that's a good starting point, yeah. There's also part of the monograph where it's more historical, going through, different artists and different texts that we skipped in this discussion. Yeah, because there was too many references, but I think, yeah, starting with I don't know if Ksenia has anything else, but yeah, if you go to the
but actually, yeah, I mentioned this book in my bibliography in the end of my monograph, but I really highly recommend to read Viveros de Castro, Cannibal Metaphysics, and probably Syuli Rolnik, who also ponders about Latin American Amerindian perspectivism, and its more psychoanalytical approach to the concept of cannibalism. Syuli Rolnik. But yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think this was our longest talk, and I'm really happy that I'm really happy that also to hear from others like Lily and Vera, and yeah, I think it was super interesting, and it's exactly why I also really enjoyed Ksenia's project, just all the different layers and the different points that are within, and I don't know if I suppose, do you consider this project finished, Ksenia? Because I feel like there is so much.
Yes. Yes.
that you can branch out into. Great, thank you.
Yeah,
yeah, here in Dublin, sorry, go on.
This field is so fruitful, it's very hard to stop here because the recipes are coming. Yeah, thank you for sacrificing your Sunday and joining us. And sorry for being a little bit hectic because I really had 10 more links to show, but I realized that there is already too much, so I will stop myself. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess people can get in touch with you through your website if they have other questions, and your contact information is there.
Absolutely. I'm very free and open to answer any questions, and my email is there, so feel free to contact. And yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good evening or morning.
Same here.
Ciao.
Ciao.